Dr. Mark Hyman is back with a new book, Young Forever, The Secrets to Living Your Longest, Healthiest Life. It was published on February 21st, and it explains the science of longevity, including the cutting-edge developments in science and medicine that, when applied correctly, can reverse your biological age as you grow chronologically older. He maps out a Young Forever program offering critical information in optimizing our core biological systems, as well as how to eat, exercise, and live for longevity. If you don't know, Dr. Mark Hyman is a senior advisor for the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and the director of the UltraWellness Center. He is a New York Times bestselling author and board president for clinical affairs for the Institute of Functional Medicine. He is the host of one of the leading health podcasts, The Doctor's Pharmacy, and is a regular medical contributor to several television shows, networks, including CBS, This Morning Today, Good Morning America, The View, and CNN. It's a pleasure to welcome Mark Hyman back to the show. Mark Hyman, welcome back. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. So great to be here again.
Oh my goodness. Your new book, Young Forever. I'm loving it. I think it's, we were talking before the show. It is so wonderful to have a functional MD like you really put together a guidebook on living your most optimal life, because it really is more than the food nowadays and the movement. It's combating everything we're up against, like all the endocrine disrupting chemicals, all the stress, all the lack of movement, our lifestyle. It's all kind of chipping away at our health span.
Totally. I mean, we really are living in a very, in a way, harmful society and a harmful environment that drives all the things that we don't want, which is disability, disease, dysfunction, accelerated aging, and early death. And in fact, our life expectancy is going down because we're doing so many of the wrong things. And yet, within that, in the same moment, there is this burgeoning science of longevity that's teaching us how our bodies work, how they were designed, and how to activate these ancient healing systems within our body, these repair, renewal, regenerative systems that actually can reverse our biological age, that can reverse disease, not just manage or treat it, but literally get rid of it. And this is what's so exciting to me. So it's kind of the best of times, worst of times moment.
Well, what I've always loved about you is you do find the silver lining, and you've always been really good at putting together books that teach people how to do exactly what you're doing with your clients in your practice. Because you only have a certain number of hours in a day.
That's true. I was seeing patients till 9:00 last night. I'm like, I can't only see so many people. So I really need to teach people how to do this for themselves. And it's most of the things you can actually do on your own, which is so amazing. It's really about becoming the CEO of your own health and being empowered with the knowledge and tools to apply the emerging science of longevity and health to your own body and your own life.
Well, we're going to jump into that today. I will say we met at a Mind Body Green conference about 7 years ago, and seeing you on the cover of this book and here today, you look you look like that reverse aging is working. So let's.
It so is actually. I look at pictures of myself from like 10 years ago. I'm like, wow, okay. But now it's definitely a little more gray hair maybe, but basically everything else is working better.
Let's do it. Well, let's jump in, because in the book you talk about the difference between normal aging and abnormal aging. Can you explain that for the listeners today?
Yeah. So I traveled to some of the most amazing places in the world where people live to be well over 100 years old on average, the blue zones. And, that was in their environment normal. They normally were active and fit and robust. And I met this guy, Pietro, was 95 years old, charging up the mountains, shepherding his sheep, and, booming voice, straight upright posture, clear eyes. I mean, he was 95 years old. I'm like, is this normal or abnormal? I mean, that's normal. What we see in our society is really abnormal, which is this sort of decline and decrepitude and frailty and disability and dysfunction and disease and ultimately early death. And it's because of these fundamental things that go wrong in our biology that we now understand are not normal. They call these the hallmarks of aging. And these things are places we can intervene, and they're the things that actually underlie all disease. So what we've come to accept as normal aging is really abnormal aging. And it's why most people, when they're asked, do you want to live to be 100 or 120, they go, no, because they see people around who are older who are not able to do stuff. And like, if you're 100 years old and you can ride your horse and you can hike a mountain and you can make love and you can, hang out with your friends and have a great time. Well, what's wrong with that? So I think nobody would be opposed to that. It's more the fear of losing their abilities and their faculties. And that's something that's really preventable for the majority of the population.
Yeah, we definitely see the older generation suffering from these chronic lifestyle diseases on multiple medications, bedbound, stuck in wheelchairs, and that function and their mental, capabilities are gone. That's not the life
Yeah.
that I think anyone
No.
wants to live till 100 or
No.
120. So can we talk about these 10 hallmarks of aging that you talk
Yeah.
about in the book and, how they came to be in the research?
Yeah, so I'm a functional medicine doctor, and as you sort of noted earlier, I do see patients, and I do treat people who have chronic illnesses. And what's really been clear to me as a functional medicine doctor is that there are these underlying fundamental things that go wrong in our biology that underlie all disease. And if we can understand what those are, and we can correct those dysfunctions or imbalances, then we can create health. And we don't have to treat all the diseases individually like whack-a-mole medicine. No, let's treat heart disease and find the drugs for that, or the drug for Alzheimer's or cancer or diabetes or whatever it is that happens to us as we get older. We don't have to do that if we understand the underlying things that go wrong that all diseases have in common. And so through the functional medicine lens, we've been doing this work for decades and decades. And what's really fun now for me to see is the emerging kind of science of longevity is actually pointing to the same thing, that underneath all these diseases are these fundamental things that go wrong. They call the hallmarks. And a lot of these are the places where we really focus in functional medicine, like the inflammation that happens with aging, damage to our microbiome or imbalances in our gut flora, mitochondrial dysfunction, trouble with hormonal balance in our nutrition, and all these things that we actually now can do something about. And so the hallmarks really are not the end thing that we need to be thinking about only, which is part of my problem with a lot of longevity science, is that most longevity science are, let's find the drug for this hallmark or that hallmark. No, we actually need to figure out what's the cause of the hallmarks. If the hallmarks are the cause of all the diseases, what's the cause of the hallmarks? And that's where functional medicine comes in, where we're either dying of too much of something we don't like, or bodies don't like, or dying of not enough of what we need, right? Dying of too much toxins, allergens, bad bugs, stress, poor diet, and not enough of the things we need, the right nutrients and nutrition and light, air, water, love, meaning, purpose, movement, rest, all the things that our bodies need to thrive. So the hallmarks basically are 10, and they're not all equal. And the one that I think is the most important that influences all the others is what we call deregulated nutrient sensing. And what that's kind of a mouthful, but essentially what it means is, how does our biology interact with the food we eat? Right? And does it actually create health or disease? And what we found is that there are 4 longevity switches or pathways or mechanisms through which we can either accelerate aging or reverse aging. And these are nutrient sensing pathways. So they sense the amount of sugar or carbohydrate or amino acids or protein or nutrient, just general energy balance. And what they do is when they're properly activated, will turn on all these amazing phenomena in our body that actually reverse biological age by reducing inflammation, by repairing our DNA, by inducing autophagy, which cleans up our bodies and creates cellular repair, and balancing our blood sugar and improving all these things that are really important for us to stay healthy for a long time. But most of what we do is we screw them up by eating the wrong foods. So we flood them with sugar and processed foods and eating all the time. And that really just screws these things up. So the beautiful thing is we now know how to sort of properly regulate these 4 pathways. And 2 of them sense an excess of things, and 2 of them sense a deficiency. 2 of them are, you might have heard about insulin and insulin resistance and insulin signaling. This is called the insulin signaling pathway. And basically it responds to eating too much sugar or starch. Now, it's good to have a little bit, when you need it to store fat and do all these wonderful things that we needed to do historically to stay alive. But in our society, we're just flooded with sugar and starch. And if you were to ask me, like, what are the 2 things, Mark, that make the most difference in terms of longevity? I would say getting rid of the starch and sugar in your diet, or at least dramatically reducing it. That's flour and sugar. And 2 is resistance training, like muscle building, and having enough protein. So if you have enough protein, you can build muscle. If you do resistance training, and if you cut out the sugar and starch, a lot of these pathways are going to properly reset. Another one is,
I
yeah,
have
go
to
ahead.
ask a follow-up question here, because what I think
Yeah,
is so interesting is some people will cherry pick longevity research and say, well, if you eat protein, then you activate
yeah,
mTOR, and
yeah,
that's actually going to cause
yeah,
aging.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
when you look at what I loved so much about your book, I was like, yes, Mark, scream it, bang your drum. Because what I see when I work with clients
Yeah,
clinically when it
yeah,
comes to their
yeah,
nutrition is,
yeah.
especially as women are making their
Mm-hmm,
way towards
mm-hmm.
premenopause and
Yeah.
menopause, they haven't been resistance training. They've been, reading the nutrition science that they get on
Mm-hmm,
Instagram, lowering their
mm,
protein intake, focus specifically on longevity, but they're not thinking about their muscle retention. They're not
yeah,
thinking about their muscles as an endocrine system that's going to
yeah.
fight aging and really take care of their blood sugar later in life. Can you
Yeah,
talk about that?
yes, literally, that's what I was going to say next. You absolutely hit on the right point, which is the second longevity switch is mTOR, which basically is this nutrient sensing pathway that detects amino acids and also carbohydrates and sugar, which people don't really talk about, but it does. And
Yeah.
so, and it's in every place in your body, every cell in your body. Now, what's exciting about this, the understanding of this particular pathway, is that if you properly regulate it, you can do two things. One, you can activate cellular cleanup and repair and renewal through something called autophagy. And two, you can build muscle, which is essential for longevity. Muscle is the currency of longevity. If you have muscle, your metabolism is good, your hormones are balanced, your inflammation is low, and you're functional. You can do what you want to do. If you want to jump up on a horse at 100 years old, you need muscle to get up on that horse. Or if you want to get up off the floor or get up
Yeah.
out of a chair. I mean, it's amazing how many people who are older cannot get up out of a chair. I mean, if you basically want to do an exercise, you basically sit straight up on a chair and just stand up without actually leaning forward or using the arms or anything. A lot of people can't do that because their legs aren't strong enough, particularly as they get older. So we lose muscle starting in their 30s, 40s, 50s. So you want to properly regulate this pathway. It's not like you want to turn it off all the time, right? If you did that, you'd starve to death. That's called mTOR inhibition. And that actually is important to do because when you inhibit mTOR, this particular pathway, you activate autophagy and cellular cleanup. And this is why so much in the longevity science research talks about things that inhibit mTOR, like starvation or fasting or rapamycin, which is a drug that inhibits mTOR. And that's not bad to do. You need to do that every day. Every day, people should not eat for at least 12 hours from dinner to breakfast, or 14 hours ideally, which is not hard. You eat dinner at 6 and you have breakfast at 8. That's a 14-hour fast. It's not terrible. And so I for example, I did that easily today. I had a dinner last night at about, I think it was 7, and I had something to eat around 11 today. And it was just how my day went. And so the body actually during that period produced this process called autophagy, which is so critical to longevity. And it mimics calorie restriction, which is something we know can extend life by a third. But the problem is if you turn that off all the time, you won't build muscle and you'll get frail. And and they've done these calorie restriction experiments. You become frail and you lose your hair and you lose muscle. And I mean, you can do extend life in animal models, but it's not fun. So how do you properly balance this? Well, you need to have protein at the right time and the right amounts to activate the mTOR as well as inhibiting it. And that generally involves on a fasted state. So let's say you've done your 12 or 14-hour fast, have a good load of protein. That's about 30 or 40 grams for most people. And that can be done through whey protein. I use regenerative goat whey in the mornings, which I find really great after my workout. I make a smoothie out of it and put all these other things in it. But there's a lot of other ways to get it. I mean, 30 grams of protein is basically like a palm-sized fish, chicken, or meat. And that's not a huge amount in terms of volume, but it actually is essential to activate mTOR to build muscle. Now, people say, well, what about, can I do it as a vegan? Well, you can, but you have to have either huge amounts of plant foods to get the volume of leucine you need, which is this particularly amino acid that's necessary to turn on muscle synthesis. In other words, if you want to turn on muscle building, you need this one particular amino acid to do it, called leucine, and it's very low in plant protein. So you got to eat a lot of plant proteins, like 6 cups of brown rice, which good luck with that. Or
There
you can
goes
take a
your
process.
Yeah, there
processed
goes your insulin.
yeah, then your carbs go right out.
Yeah.
And right. And then you actually can do it through processed plant protein powders, which I'm not totally opposed to, but it's a processed food. And also you have to add amino acids to that. So you have to add extra branched chain amino acids and extra leucine. So you can do it, but it's tricky. And
Yeah.
so you have to make sure you get adequate amounts of mTOR activation to build muscle. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be in trouble as you get older. And that's key. So it's all bad or all good. People get in this binary thing. It's, you should never activate mTOR. Well, no, if you didn't do that, you'd be in trouble. You wouldn't be able to make proteins and synthesize things. So that's why these are such critical hallmarks. The other two are AMPK and sirtuins, which are really important, that are detecting not enough nutrients. And so drugs like metformin, for example, work on AMPK. Things like NAD, people have heard about, work on sirtuins. These are important pathways to regulate. But I'm not a big fan of using drugs to regulate, particularly AMPK, because metformin is not as good as lifestyle and has other potential complications. There's some large trials going on now about it, but I think it's kind of the latest rage. And I kind of don't agree with just handing out metformin for longevity as a prescription.
Yeah, I'd love to explore how people can work with AMPK through lifestyle, and instead of looking for the quick fix. The quick fix ends up in headlines on the news and people get excited. I'll take metformin for longevity. I'll start using Trulicity for weight loss. I mean, we can kind of go down multiple rabbit holes on all of the type 2 diabetes medications, but we know as practitioners that, I've seen you do it. Take a client who's been on a type 2 diabetes medication, and with lifestyle and diet, within a month or 6 weeks, they're no longer in need of those medications.
No, absolutely. So, AMPK is pretty important because it sort of sensitive to low levels of energy and nutrients. And so that is actually important to do. But when you actually are having, problems with blood sugar regulation and too much sugar, it actually causes problems with AMPK. And so you can actually really reset it with all sorts of combinations of nutrients and herbs, for example, like reishi mushrooms, or ginseng, which is an herb, or black cumin seed, which you can use, bitter melon, which is a Chinese food, tangerines, chlorogenic acid from coffee, capsaicin from hot peppers, all activate AMPK instead of metformin. So there's ways you can start to include some of these interesting foods in your diet to do that.
Well, since you're now talking about food, let's go there. How does food play a role in our healthy aging? And when you're working with clients or, readers of your new book, Young Forever, what are your recommendations in regards to eating? Because we do want people eating protein and activating mTOR. We do want people getting all of the phytonutrients and taking care of themselves. So what can we do?
That's a great question. And I think I just want to kind of back up a little bit. So what I just talked about, those 4 things, that's just one of the hallmarks. But but it actually influences all the others. So if those are not working, you get more inflammation. Your mitochondria don't work. Your microbiome screwed up. You get more epigenetic changes. You get more telomere shortening. You get more damage to proteins. You get more DNA damage that happens. You get more zombie cells. The list goes on. So when you focus on the nutrition part, you're actually focusing on all the other stuff too. So then the question is, what the heck should I eat if I want to be 120? And I think, you can look at different populations, and whether it's a Seventh-day Adventist that were vegetarians or who would be very old, or at the turn of the last century, the Plains Indians were the longest lived people in the world at the time, with the most centenarians, and all they lived on was bison and some berries. So what should we be doing? All meat? Should we be carnivore? Should we be vegan? It's confusing. So basically, as I said, that there's a couple of key principles: what not to eat and what to eat, right? So they're both important. What not to eat, if you want to live a long, healthy life, is ultra-processed food. There is no question about that. No one will disagree with me, whether you're a vegan or a carnivore. Everybody agrees that that's a bad thing. And also starch and sugar. So it's not that we can't have any sugar at all, but we have to have an ability to properly handle that. And that requires us to have a healthy metabolism. Now, only 6.8% of Americans have a healthy metabolism, which is not most of us. So we have to be careful, because we're all on that spectrum of prediabetes to type 2 diabetes. So having a low amount of starch and sugar is super important. And flour is just as bad as sugar. If you're having flour products, not just because of the gluten, because people think that's bad, but the actual starch. A piece of white bread is the gold standard for glycemic index. That means that's a score of 100. Table sugar 65.
Yeah.
so Cheerios are 74. So
Yeah.
I mean, so those, you do not want to be eating that stuff on a regular basis. And if you're having bread, my joke is you can have bread as long as you stand on it and it doesn't squish.
Yeah, there
So
you go.
like in Germany, they have this kind of bread where you need those deli meat slicers to actually cut the bread, because a knife, you can't cut it with a knife. It's so dense. So that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's not most of us. The second thing is you want to make sure that your diet's high in phytochemicals, which are these medicines and food I talk a lot about in the book. And a lot of them activate some of these pathways, like I just mentioned about AMPK, but they also regulate sirtuins and mtor, and many of the other things can be regulated through these amazing phytochemicals that are in our plant kingdom. And there may be anywhere from 25,000 to 1,000,000. We're still trying to figure it out how many of these are, but they're super powerful. And I talk about the most powerful ones in the book. For example, curcumin and green tea and glucophorinin from broccoli family and things from pomegranate like urolithin A, and some really interesting compounds that work really well on some of these longevity pathways. So you want lots of phytochemicals, so colorful plant foods, the more sort of organic, original to their original forms, like heirloom is better. But most vegetables today are bred for starch and size and stability and look. But if you have a tomato that you pick off your garden in the end of August and it's a cherry tomato you put in your mouth, it's like an explosion of flavor. If you go to the store in the middle of February, and where I live in Massachusetts, you're getting like a thing that looks like a tomato, but it tastes like cardboard. So
Right.
that's not. And then you want to make sure you understand how to regulate protein, because that, as we talked about, is such a key part of longevity. If you look at all the data on longevity, even studies that show that it may be better to be vegan when you're younger, all show that you have to have more protein as you get older for two reasons. One, you tend to lose more muscle. And two, you actually get anabolic resistance, meaning your muscles become resistant to building more muscle. So you need actually more protein, and you need more high quality protein. So just the science, this is not a moral conversation, but the science is really clear that the best source of protein to build muscle is animal protein. And that can be whey protein, chicken, fish, meat, eggs, but that is a source of protein that is actually going to turn on muscle synthesis in your body. And that's essential to eat, and you need more. So having about 30 or 40 grams in the morning is really key on a fasted state that will kick in that process. And then probably another 25 to 30 to 40 grams, depending on your size, at the next couple of meals. So probably 100 grams a day, 120. Sometimes people need more. Like if you're very active, if you want to build more muscle, if you're lifting weights, if you're, needing more protein, you might need more. So that's really essential to understand. And I talk about the ProAge study in the book, which is, all the world's leading scientists on protein and aging, and they came together, they looked at all the science, and they came up with a set of recommendations, which I kind of go over in the book. So this is not my opinion. It's not, I was a vegetarian, I was a vegan, I had lots of different lives and I've seen my body change as I was a vegetarian vegan when I was younger. I was fit. I was running, 5 miles a day. I was doing yoga, but I was like kind of look scrawny.
Yeah.
And I show this picture now. I'm like 62. Well, I'm not 63, but I took it when I was 62. I just kind of ripped and have way more muscle mass, and my body composition is completely different simply by changing my protein intake and also my exercise. And the other thing is, making sure you're eating for your microbiome. This is really important, with lots of phytochemicals, pre and probiotic foods, lots of fiber, a key, and also eat a lot of good fats. Your brain needs fat, particularly omega-3 fats, olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds. These should be your staple fats. And, and then you can have sometimes saturated fat. I think it's not all bad for most people. So that's kind of the principle. It's not complicated. I talk about all in the book, and how to choose the right fats, how to choose the right proteins, how to choose the right plants, and how to sort of make sense of all the conflicting nutrition research out there. But I've been doing this for 40 years. I've been studying nutrition, since, I'm embarrassed to say, probably 43 years now. And, it's changed a lot, but I've learned so much about it, not just from the science and reading the papers and doing my own research at Cleveland Clinic, but from actually seeing patients. And that's, we call those anecdotes, but they really are powerful when you start to see over and over the power of food as medicine to change people's lives and reverse all sorts of chronic diseases.
Definitely. And I mean, you can even see it in the way that we talked about leveling up your own personal life and looking at
Hmm.
you at 62 years
Hmm.
old versus, say, 40.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about how your workouts and recommendations for the role of exercise in longevity works and,
Yeah.
what you're doing day to day, what you recommend for your patients?
Yeah. So I was really big on the running and cardio, and I was like riding my bike 100 miles and running 5 miles, 8 miles a day sometimes. And that was great, but I just kind of was like,
VO2 max. VO2
but
max.
exactly. But I like do yoga, and I was like, oh, I did good. I got my strength from yoga. But the truth was, I was sort of kidding myself, and I didn't really like gyms. They were smelly and loud, and all these guys were there with big muscles that were intimidating to me.
They're
So,
grunting.
I'm like, and it hurt. Whenever I tried to do it, it would like hurt, and I'm like, why would people do this? It hurts so much. And then I sort of got wise, and when I was 60, actually 59, I started to do weights, and it changed everything for me. It was really remarkable to see the change in my body, the change in my stability, the change in my ability to do stuff and function and be athletic, and do everything I want to do. Just went up dramatically, and I thought I was already in pretty good shape. So the key is, as you get older, resistance training becomes more and more important. That can be bands, it can be weights, it can be body weight. There's a million things you can do, but it's important to get in a regular routine 3 to 4 times a week, half an hour. It's an hour and a half. It is going to be very well spent in terms of the benefits and the payoff. And when you do that as you get older, you can stay really strong and functional until very, very, very late. And I think that's a key piece. And then VO2 max is also important, which is increasing your fitness level, which may not mean going for an hour run. It may mean doing like sprints for half an hour or 20 minutes, maybe more effective than going for like a long jog somewhere. And I think learning how to activate these ancient pathways through aggressive stress, which is what we call hormesis, this stress that doesn't kill you but makes you stronger, is so important. So that's why, sprints, I did like my Peloton, and like, someone's yelling at you like, okay, go, 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 go. And, like my heart rate goes up to like 160, and I'm like, ugh. But and then you get like a little break, and then you do it again and again. And that it's uncomfortable, but it actually is the thing that is putting your body in a state of proper fitness, which correlates with longevity. The VO2 max you mentioned, which is basically your measure of fitness level, the maximum amount of oxygen you can consume per minute. When that's high, it correlates with longevity in a linear way. The higher your VO2 max, the longer you live, the healthier you are. So it's important to work on both strength and flex and muscle. And then flexibility is the other key. Yoga, stretching. Most people end up having more pain and discomfort, and it's because they get stiff and when they get older, but you don't have to.
Definitely. Well, you bring up a really important topic, hormesis. It's a stress that happens on your body that is a good stress, right? We think about stress and we'll talk about the importance of limiting chronic lifestyle stress next, but can we talk about the importance of stress and how we can stress our body in a multitude of ways?
Yeah.
I'm seeing people in saunas, cold plunging, and you
Yeah.
talk
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
about a lot of this
Yeah.
great stuff in your new
Yeah.
book. So
Yeah. So basically, this idea that we've lived in these perfectly controlled environments with very little physiologic stresses anymore. We have food available all the time. We don't have to exercise that much to live. We don't have extremes of hot and cold temperature. And historically, we evolved with these various stressors. And what our bodies learn to do is to protect ourselves in the face of various kinds of stressors, whether it's starvation or whether it's, you know, heat or cold extreme temperatures. And so we have these ancient pathways, these longevity switches, I call them, and we now can activate them through putting ourselves in a little bit of a stressful situation, whether it's a fast, like 14 or 16 hours overnight, or a day long fast, or sometimes people do 3 days to a week. That's a kind of hormesis stress. Strength training, VO2 max training, also a stress. But there's other kinds that I use regularly. Hot and cold therapy is accessible to most people. If you have a hot bath and a shower, you can do that. I basically this morning woke up and took a 2-minute ice cold shower. And let me tell you, in February in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, it's cold. The water's cold coming out of the ground in the well. And that's a sort of a stress to your body. And your body goes, oh, let me turn on all my healing and repair systems. So the body has this great ability when we stress it to respond and get stronger, just like when you lift weights. And when you have extremes of, for example, cold, you activate brown fat, you activate dopamine and neurotransmitter function. When you have extremes of heat, like saunas, you activate heat shock proteins that fix damaged proteins, which is one of the hallmarks of aging, and that also activates your innate immune system. And there's also other kinds of stresses that are a little hard to get to. For example, hyperbaric oxygen, you need a special machine, but that's a powerful stress that can reverse some of the hallmarks of aging that we see, like the zombie cells and telomeres, can lengthen telomeres more than anything else. Hypoxia, another thing. If you put an oxygen restriction mask on, you can buy it like for $50 on Amazon, and you consider you're just working, or you can exercise with it like athletes. That puts you in a state of low oxygen, and that your body goes, whoa, what's going on? And it starts to make more mitochondria, cleans up all cells and kills all the bad ones. And it's kind of an amazing thing. There's also machines that do it called Cell Gym and other things that you actually mimic high altitude and low altitude. And then there are other things like ozone therapy, which is an oxidative therapy that's been found to activate your body's own healing systems. So when you do that, it goes, oh, I better do something to save myself. So I'm going to increase my anti-inflammatory systems. I'm going to increase my antioxidant systems. I'm going to boost my stem cell production. I'm going to build muscle. I'm going to increase my bone density. I'm going to increase stem cells. I'm going to increase my cognitive function and neurotransmitters. So all these things happen as a result of these stresses, which, obviously, if you're in a cold bath for too long, you're going to die of hypothermia. If you're in a sauna for too long, you're going to die of heat stroke, right? So it's that Goldilocks amount that can trigger us to activate these healing systems. And I find these practices are really powerful and are a daily part of my life.
Well, can you talk us through how and when, it sounds like you took an ice cold shower this morning, but how and when you incorporate sauna, heat therapy, your workouts throughout your day? And there's the right time for these activities?
I mean, the right time is whenever you can do it, basically. Yeah. When should I take my vitamins? Whenever you remember. Yeah. I think the key is, for me, I find the morning is great. I wake up. I usually have a morning practice where I'll meditate. Then I'll do a little journaling if I have a little extra time. If my day is a little shorter, I will do a 30-minute high-intensity resistance band training. And I use the Tom Brady bands, which I can travel with anywhere, and it's great. And then while I'm at that band training, I turn on my steam shower, which I put in over 20 years ago. And it wasn't even that expensive. And I've used it for 23 years, and it hasn't broken. So
Perfect.
That's good. And then I go in the steam after that for at least 10 minutes. It's super hot. I make a couple rounds, and I fill my bathtub up with just cold water, and I go back and forth a couple of cycles. And then I get out and I have my protein shake, which I call my healthy aging shake. I write about in the book Young Forever. Essentially, it's regenerative goat whey. I put in a bunch of fun things like mitoPure, which is urolithin A that actually helps increase mitochondrial function and builds muscle and fitness. I put in my gut food powder, which is like a multivitamin for the gut with pre and probiotics and polyphenols. I put in some adaptogenic mushrooms as a sort of a tonic for my adrenals. I also put in a little creatine to help with more muscle building. And that's kind of my morning shake. I throw some berries in there, some macadamia milk, and off I go. And that's really, within an hour and a half, I can pretty much do a whole routine that sets me up for the day, and that incorporates a lot of things that I want to do to stay young and feel good. And I'll take my supplements with my shake in the morning.
I love it. Just stack everything, check it off your list, and get going throughout the rest of your day. Well, when you look at your days, I mean, you said that you ended with clients last night at 9 p.m. That can feel long and stressful.
Yeah, that was unusual. I usually don't do that.
Yeah. But I know those days just sort of pop up on your calendar, and that you just roll through it. Slight hormesis, but if it's chronic and that's someone's life where they're in an office 14 hours a day, their email box is loaded, they have multiple tabs in their brain open. How is that stress affecting their longevity? What does the research tell us about stress and longevity? And what should we be doing to really mitigate it?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I went to the blue zones, what was interesting to me there was that they weren't on a path of, achievement or
Mhm.
making $1 million or starting a new company. They were just living and having a beautiful time living in community with the people they love and living a relatively simple life. Now, most of us can't approximate that. But it is important to sort of look at what's your choices are, what matters to you, what your values are, and where are you out of alignment with that and what matters. And then looking at how do you construct your life so that you can incorporate regular daily periods of discharging the stress that is inevitable part of living. And whether it's meditation or yoga or a breath practice or stretching, or a hot and cold session, it doesn't, have to be a lot. I can do for example, in 15 minutes, I can do a steam and an ice bath, and it completely resets my nervous system. So we have to learn the practices of active relaxation in order to deal with these chronic stresses, and they're bad. When we have chronic stress, it shortens our telomeres, it causes epigenetic changes that damage us, it affects our cortisol levels and nutritional regulation, it causes more inflammation, more mitochondrial damage. Our gut microbiome is listening to your thoughts and feelings and changing for the worse. So everything that we feel, think, believe is hugely impactful. And we know that your mindset and your sense of meaning and purpose are huge predictors of longevity. Optimists live longer, even if they're wrong. So, think about some of the data on this is really amazing. If you have meaning and purpose, I mean, if you're working hard, if you have meaning and purpose, you live 7 years longer than if you don't. And that's
Yeah.
as much of a life extension as if we completely eradicated cancer and heart disease from the face of the planet. So it's not a minimal kind of impact. It's a huge impact. So and often the way to mitigate stress is through connection and community and identifying those people in your world that you can build these long-term connected relationships to, because we don't seem to value that so much in our culture anymore. We're just kind of go go go, and we don't invest in friendships, and that is such an incredible part of the longevity prescription that people miss. That being part of a community, whether it's a bowling group or a knitting group or a church group, whatever it is, that sense of belonging and connectedness actually activates a lot of these ancient healing systems in our body.
Mm. It's such an important piece because I think when we, read the news online or someone saying, here's
I
five
don't.
ways, no, but like five ways to get, to ditch stress. It, it's always like the last thing on the list. Like
Hmm.
call a friend, see your family member, like be with your loved
Mm,
one,
mm,
cuddle,
mm,
and
mm.
it
Yeah,
is like, it's, for me at least, it is an immediate de-stressing tonic. If
yeah,
my
yeah,
husband pulls me in for a big hug and it's like, I
yeah,
got you, babe. It's
yeah.
completely different than me trying to meditate through some stress where I'm like, how do I fix this?
Yeah,
It's just it's a
it's
people,
true.
it's community, it's everything.
It's true. I mean, that was one of the things I found in the research that I did for the book was that, as we get older, we have epigenetic changes to the control mechanism of our genes, and that's how we measure biological age. We can literally reverse that. And what was interesting was that cuddling helps to improve your epigenetic expression. So simply cuddling has an impact on your genes and which genes are turned on or off. And so we shouldn't minimize the impact of these powerful things. As important as what you eat or exercise is building a sense of connection, belonging, meaning, and also learning how to regulate the stress that we're all under.
Definitely. I love that. So beyond food, lifestyle, community,
Mm, mm,
you dive in this book and you talked about some of those things like hyperbaric, ozone, heat and cold therapy, but you also talk about supplements. And it's interesting because
yeah.
I just had Chris Kresser on the podcast
Wow.
again. It's
Mm.
you guys are two of my favorite guys. Um, and we were just having a candid conversation about how nutrient levels in our food, in our soil, really primarily, have depleted. And he used to push back against supplements and not want to
Mm,
take them and really
mm,
want to get everything through food. And
mhm,
everyone in the functional space, at least the doctors that I work with, that I respect, that I share patients with,
Hmm.
Supplements are a big part of the puzzle when it comes to optimizing someone's vitality and getting
Yeah.
them to a place where they're feeling their best. Can you talk
Yeah.
about your um, philosophy when it comes to supplementation and how it plays a role in longevity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the 80-20, right? So 80% is what you're eating, exercise, sleep, stress management, connection, all those things are so important. And then the 20% is what are the things that you can do to really kind of get that extra 20%. And I think nutritional supplements are really important. And there's some that are just non-negotiable. Vitamin D, the research is just really robust on the benefits of having adequate vitamin D levels, omega-3 fats, a good multivitamin and mineral, really essential. Magnesium for most people because they're living in a stressful life and magnesium gets depleted with stress and it's super important. So those are the sort of foundational things we need. And I think, we go, people, I didn't take supplements. None of the blue zones people took supplements. They lived to be 100 years old. What about that? And they're right. But maybe if you grew or hunted and gathered all your own wild food, you drank pure, clean water, had no chronic stress, lived in connection and community, slept 9 hours a night, and moved your bodies naturally and exercise every day. And yeah, maybe you don't need supplements. But I haven't met too many people like that. So most of us do, and I think those are the foundational ones. But there's some other ones that are really important too that we're learning about that can have really important effects on some of these longevity pathways. Like some of these are phytochemicals like fisetin from strawberries, which is one of the senolytic compounds that helps kill zombie cells, or quercetin and other flavonols that are things like hesperidin and rutin and luteolin are really powerful for regulating some of the immune things that we need to regulate and some of these longevity pathways. Pterostilbene, which is a kind of a like resveratrol, is another one. Curcumin, green tea extract, galactic halcyon gallate, glucophorinin, which is from broccoli, and urolithin A, which comes from pomegranate. These are some of the superstars when it comes to longevity. So those are really important. You can get those from food, but you probably might want to consider taking them. Also, NMN is an interesting supplement. There's a lot of research on that now, and it's very promising. I think we're still learning about it, but I think it can be very helpful in working on some of these sort of pathways like sirtuins. And then there's sort of additional stuff that you might want to take. For example, I mentioned I take creatine in my shake. That's as we get older, again, we lose the ability to build muscle. And so, very, very important. And I also find that there's additional supplements like carnitine and acetylcysteine, PQQ, lipoic acid that are mitochondrial supportive supplements. So those are really the things that I kind of focus on mostly. But there's a lot of stuff to try and do, and there's new stuff coming out all the time. But I think those are the most exciting to me. And there's other ones like spermidine and fatty 15 and others that are kind of moving around the longevity space. But if you focus on the phytochemicals, you focus on the basics. If you want to add a little extra stuff for muscle building, a little mitochondrial support, you have to feel like what you're comfortable with, what you can afford. But most people can afford a multivitamin, fish oil, and vitamin D, which is probably $1 a day or less for most people, and that's very good for your overall health and insurance.
Definitely. When it comes to your creatine addition to your smoothie, when should someone be adding that in, and when should they be avoiding it, if at
Well,
all?
I think if you're really looking to build muscle, but as you get older, having a high quality protein like a whey protein, I use regeneratively raised goat whey. Regenerative because I want to protect the environment. I don't want chemicals and pesticides and herbicides and stuff in what I'm having. And two, because goats typically are less inflammatory than cow dairy, and they have A2 casein, which sometimes is in the product as well, and that can be less inflammatory. So I find I tolerate it way better. I don't have any reaction to it, and it really is incredible for its effect on accelerating muscle growth.
Great. So,
It also boosts glutathione, by the way, which is something that declines as we age. It's important for detoxification as an antioxidant support and so
yeah, our most potent endogenous antioxidant.
forth. Hmm.
So, so other than what we talked about, which is just your lifestyle, is there anything that you would say is the most exciting and innovating when it comes to new therapy or
Yeah.
research on what's going to stop or reverse aging?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really cool things out there. I mean, we mentioned hyperbaric oxygen, we mentioned ozone. There's some other things that are really cool. One of them is called plasmapheresis, and I think we're still going to learn more about this as time goes on. But this is a process of literally filtering and cleaning your blood. And in animal models, what they've done is they've wired up the circulation of an old mouse to a young mouse, and the old mouse becomes young. And they're like, well, wait a minute, is it stuff from the young mouse that's making the old mouse young, or is it stuff they're taking out of the old mouse going into the old mouse going into the young mouse that's helping them? And what they did was a kind of a reverse engineer study where they didn't hook up the circulation. They just filtered the blood of the old mouse, took out the plasma, which is basically the soup that all your cells float around in, your white and red cells and your platelets, and they got rid of it. And old plasma has inflammatory compounds, damaged proteins, all kinds of stuff, zombie cells, things that accelerate aging. And we put them cells back in, and it seemed to create the same benefits in terms of age reversing benefits as these sort of parabiosis experiments. So I think transfer plasma exchange is very exciting. I think exosomes, which are compounds that are derived from stem cells, also very rejuvenating and healing. Stem cell therapy itself may be interesting to try and experiment with as time goes on. We're learning more about that. And there's hyperbaric oxygen. I think that's very exciting therapy. So there's a lot of these emerging therapies that I kind of get excited about. There's certain drugs that are out there like rapamycin, which works on mtor we talked about, that inhibits mtor. So that might be something to cycle on and off of as a therapy. A lot of people are doing that in the longevity space.
I'm seeing that as well. So the plasma exchange, that sounds really interesting, and definitely if there's a Hollywood movie writer listening, that's going to be your next big script.
There was a TV show called Silicon Valley, and there was an episode called Blood Boy, and it was about a rich Silicon Valley billionaire who got the blood of young men to revive him. And it's actually what Chairman Mao did in China. He got the blood of Red Army soldiers and would transfuse it into himself. And, it's actually makes a lot of sense when you look at the biology of it. And I actually had it done on myself after I had COVID, and I had a terrible arthritis. My hand blew up. I felt like crap. And I went and had it done, and it cleaned my blood. And literally the next day, my arthritis was gone. My hand was back to normal. I had full energy. It was quite remarkable to see, when you can do it as a preventive, and then if you feel good, you don't notice anything, right? I always say if you have don't have a headache, and aspirin doesn't do anything, right? You don't feel anything. But if you have a headache, take aspirin, feel better. So basically, I had something wrong, and I did it, and I could see the benefit of it directly from reducing inflammation and taking all the bad stuff from my blood. I was pretty convinced after that.
Wow. I mean, these feel like such cutting edge therapies. And the hard part is it feels like it's just, the access is just to you and your clients.
Yeah.
I
mean, it is a problem.
It's a problem.
It is a problem. I mean, right now, what I would say is most of the stuff in my book, Young Forever, is accessible, is either free or part of your normal expenses of buying food anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe you can buy some extra bands for a set of weights that may be $100 or something. But the reality is that most of the stuff that I talk about in the book is accessible to everybody, is free or really inexpensive, and can have profound benefits, and takes up 80% of the way there. So with those things, I think the average person today can get to 100 and in good health. If you want to get to 120, 150, there may be a lot of extra stuff you have to do. But for most of us, we can live 100 good years in good shape, feeling good, and without the diseases of our modern society that we see. And that's what's sort of exciting to me. I think it's we've learned kind of in a way what people have been searching for millennia, which is the fountain of youth. And we've learned through the science of longevity how to understand why and how we age and how to turn back the clock. And so there's study after study now that's showing we can, through simple lifestyle interventions, turn back your biological clock and measure the changes in your biological age. So I'm 63 now, but my biological age is 43. So even though I'm chronologically 63, I'm biologically 43 because of the things that I've done and do. So I probably, who knows? Can I get to 25? Can I get to 30? I don't know. I'm going to keep working on it, but I'll let you know next time.
Report back. So what do you think? I mean, for a lot of people, they aren't able, they're able to grab your book. They aren't able to see you personally. What do you think that other physicians can be doing to support longevity in their patients? And what advice do you have for them?
Well, I think, what I believe in, Kelly, is that most of us can manage our own health on our own. And doctors don't know anything about health. They learn how to diagnose disease. But if you say to your doctor, look, I want you to get me an optimal health, I want you to help me live to 100, they're going to go, well, take a statin, take an aspirin, like, good
Yeah.
luck. I mean, they're not trained to do this and no fault of their own. So that's really why in the book I created a roadmap for people with very specific questionnaires about how to identify where their dysfunctions were, what they could do on their own, and what they could do with self-care. And there's now a company that I've co-founded and I'm the chief medical officer of, called Function Health, which is functionhealth.com, where you can go and get a full panel of over 100 biomarkers, a longevity biomarker panel for $500, which is normally retails at $15,000. And it comes with a whole interpretive guide that I've created and we've written. It's over 500 pages of content explaining exactly what the tests mean, what to do about them, and how to optimize your own health. So for most people, their doctor may not be the right person. If you find out someone who's really focused on this, they might be, but most doctors are not. So you're going to have to take it into your own hands. And that's really why I wrote this book. It's why I created Function Health with my colleagues. And actually I'm really working very hard to empower people to do this on their own, because most of it you can.
Yeah. And even some of the clients that you see that you share this information with and give them a roadmap and a plan, if they're not in their kitchen, in their gym, in their bed early and sleeping, you can't do much beyond that, right? I mean, so it
No.
really truly is about the person's habits, their daily lifestyle, how they set up their environment to follow through with their goals. So thank you so much for writing this book, Forever Young. It's really, and David Sinclair said it best, an impressive guidebook. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank
It's
you for
Young
this
Forever.
one.
Young
It
Forever.
is.
Forever Young was Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Young Forever. We'll put a link in the show notes. Where can people follow along? Where can they learn more about the book? Where can they buy it?
Well, you can go to youngforeverbook.com, and there's all these resources on there. There's lots of free bonuses. You can get it wherever you get your books. You can follow me on social media, Dr. Mark Hyman, listen to my podcast, The Doctor's Pharmacy, that's with an F. And there's a lot of episodes I have on longevity that I recorded. So I think you'll have plenty of more information if you want to dive deeper into this.
Yeah, you definitely give people the keys to the kingdom. They just need to set up their life and get going.
There you go.
Thanks, Dr. Mark Hyman, for being here again.
Kelly.
Congratulations on the book and best of luck.
Thank you.